if we were to buy Gallagher from them, that would sort them out, get them over the tricky period of this particular PSR ruling period, and then they could then reset and go and buy someone like Julian Alvarez. And Alvarez would go to Chelsea without even thinking about it because of the brand that Chelsea have for success that was created during a period when they were cheating under Abramovich, and they are still getting all the juice from the squeeze now. Whereas if Tottenham went in for Julian Alvarez, I wouldn't be surprised if Alvarez said, no, I'm not going to go to Tottenham because they haven't won anything. And the reason why we haven't won anything is in no small part because of the team that he currently plays for and the team that he probably will choose to play for, having cheated over the last 25 years. It's an absolute mockery. Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. I am Sean Butler. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things that you love. It's Friday. Happy Friday. Bugsy's not here right now. It's just me. And I've got a lot to talk about with you today, guys. I've got about 12 different topics, some of them new, some of them extensions, some of them updates. So please bear with me all the way to the end. Can you do me a favor, smash the like button for me if you enjoy the video? You always do. Hit the like button anyway. Another one yesterday, 1,500 likes, unbelievably generous of you. Really appreciate it because it helps the channel so much. Hit the subscribe button if you're seeing us for the first time. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's haircut. I mean today's topic. No, I'm kidding. But I have actually been looking at your comments and most of you have saying that the hair looks better than the hat. So I found the hat, but I've decided to give the hair a whirl today. Anyway, let's get straight in to the topics. Right, first and foremost, we've got to do stuff off of the transfer news, views and clues, but I promise you we'll get to some interesting transfer news, views and clues as well in just a moment. Dan Plumley, football finance expert Dan Plumley, has come out and said that he believes that Tottenham, if they are going to receive investment from any investor like MSP Capital, then it would be up to a valuation of £1.2 billion for 40%. He believes that the club is valued at £2 billion, maybe slightly more. Somewhere between 2 and 3 billion is what he said. I'll be honest, guys, I think I've got questions for Dan in this regard. Basically, that I don't agree with him on many of the things that he says. First and foremost, I don't believe that the club is valued at between 2 and 3 billion pound. You have to consider, you know, relative valuations. Chelsea were valued at 4.5 billion and had a 1.5 billion in debts written off by Abramovich. They had infrastructure on their books that was handed over, like hotels, and the revenue from those hotels were going onto the books of Chelsea. Now, recently we found out that Chelsea sold those hotels to a third party that are essentially the same third party owner, and the revenue remained on Chelsea's books. And that, whilst that hadn't necessarily been approved yet by the Premier League, it still shows that the valuation embeds a lot of the infrastructure that surrounds the football club, not just the stadium and the squad, but everything around it as well. And in Tottenham's case, there's, I think, 19 different companies, that of which the vast majority include infrastructure related stuff where the intentions are to have the revenue when the projects are finished and are fully baked in to come back to Tottenham. And so if you are buying a 40% investment into a club like Tottenham Hotspur, where the revenues of all of the third party assets will eventually drift back into that Tottenham Hotspur asset of which you now own 40%, then you will have the revenues of that slice as well. And so for me, there is absolutely no chance that if Chelsea are valued at 4.5 billion with £1.5 billion of debt written off, that Tottenham are valued at a fraction of that price. Sorry, Dan, I couldn't disagree with you more. I think Tottenham are valued far higher, far higher. But either way, that doesn't really matter. The second question I'd have for him, or for anyone really, is, you know, before we decide whether it's a viable idea, is what happens to the money? Even if it is £1.2 billion that comes in for 40%, how much of that goes into the Levy Enix pockets as a profit on a transaction that started 25 years ago? Remember, they don't take dividends. They do take, you know, generous salaries, although I would argue that Daniel Levy, even though his salary is the top of the list in the Premier League, if you were to compare the roles of CEOs of similar sized market cap companies on the FTSE 250, for example, the CEO of Pearson, which is a similar sized company to Tottenham, generally speaking about £5 billion, give or take, he gets paid £9 million a year. So, you know, the compensations are obviously somewhat in line with what someone of his intelligence, caliber and business acumen could get in a different world. So I know some of you get irritated by his salary, but you know, it's not a massive deal to me. Anyway, so what happens to the money? how much of it goes to Tottenham, how much of it goes out of the club altogether, that's the most important thing. And also what happens in the power struggle in the boardroom. There's always unintended consequences when there's power shares that happen. And for me, it's important to know these sorts of things before you can get behind any particular investment, because you need to make sure that there's synergies and alignment in the vision and that we're going to move forward. You know, just because we haven't had too much success under Daniel Levy, you know, the idea that a new owner is a better owner is foolhardy, right? You have to make sure that your research is clear. And listen, I wonder how much of the money, how much of any new investment would actually be still in the club at the end of it. Bearing in mind that obviously there's an incentive for Levy and Enoch to take some money out, profit on their trade, but also there is an incentive to leave the money in if it means that they can achieve different projects and processes and the goals quicker with that investment, that allows the other side, the other half of their own ownership percentage that they haven't sold, to inflate in value as well. So double-edged sword. Again, too early to tell, but all I'm reading right now is about noise about investments in Tottenham, and so I thought I'd bring it to your attention. Let's move away from that, but before we get into transfer news, views and clues, one last thing about Daniel Levy is, well, he's decided to give evidence against Manchester City in court in this lawsuit that's started, where Manchester City are suing the Premier League for basically stopping competition law or breaking competition law by telling all the clubs in the Premier League that you're not allowed to have overly inflated commercial deals from third-party companies that are associated to the football club in any way, shape or form. And it's the same 4 teams that went against the grain for this particular vote, as did a vote recently: Aston Villa, Chelsea, Newcastle and Manchester City. And those were the 4 teams that voted against the anchoring model, and these are now the same 4 teams that have voted in favour or look like they're going to support Manchester City in their in the legal suit regarding not just trying to stop the Premier League from limiting the size of the sponsorship deals that clubs are allowed to have, but actually to sue for damages, which is quite incredible. I mean, to me, I find it absolutely insane. It makes a mockery of the whole thing. When the City owners came into the Premier League, they knew the rules. They signed up to the rules as they were then. It's a democracy. By 2/3 vote, all the Premier League teams decide on the future of the game, and they don't like the fact that they want to spend as much money as they want and create a value gap that's, or a competitive imbalance that's almost, you know, unbreachable unless you have the same sort of size pockets as they do. And, you know, obviously you can see Chelsea have the same sort of ambitions, but they are also funded by similar sort of parties, just via a third-party backdoor entrance. The same for Newcastle. Aston Villa's rationale for always supporting these things isn't quite as clear to me. Their owners, whilst they do have Middle East support in the background, it's not to the same tune, and their ambitions, I don't think, are necessarily around the same thing. I think what they're trying to do is to kind of support disruption towards the processes of the Premier League enforcing FFP and PSR, because they know that they are flying very close to the sun, like Icarus, when it comes to their overspend in their ambitions over the last 2 or 3 years. But in any event, it looks like there is civil war in the Premier League, and 4 teams have decided to support Manchester City. And as far as I can tell, having read this morning, about 8 or 9 have decided to give evidence against them in favour of the Premier League, Daniel Levy being one of them. The same with Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal. Teams that I guess would rather the competition gap be closed from the top down, rather than being expanded, extended, and then everyone else having to, you know, just go and find their own trillionaire owners. And there's not that many families out there that are left that have got more money in their ground than exists in the world. Newcastle and Manchester City have got 2 of the few that exist. Guys, let's move away from that stuff anyway. Sorry, it's been a long video already, and I've got loads more to talk about with you. Chris Davies has left the club. Assistant manager to Ange Postecoglou. He's gone to Birmingham City. Congratulations to him. Very well received, making his first move into management. Shout out to that guy. He's done a great job, you know, during his time here. And we don't know what's going to happen with regards replacing him, whether or not Jedinak or Ryan Mason is going to get the promotion, or we're going to look for someone else to come in. I hope it's the latter, because I really think that we need some specialist support in regards coaches anyway, regardless of the idea of Chris Davies leaving. But with him leaving on top of that, I think our backroom staff needs a lot of work over the coming weeks and months. But good luck to Chris. Joe RODON, guys, his contract was extended yesterday by an extra year so as to not allow him to leave for free. That doesn't mean that we've got any intentions to play him. It's just a way of obviously protecting the assets and to ensure that hopefully we can get full peak valuation on him when we sell him to Leeds. Hiroki Ito, we spoke about him yesterday, the link that whenever we talk about him, it gets stronger. Well, it's everywhere this morning. Hiroki Ito is everywhere. Usually it's just one or two links and then an aggregator or two, but Ito has made his way into all of the broadsheets. And so listen, I'd love it if we sign this guy. £25 million is the release fee on him, and that is I think a reasonable price for a player of his quality. I think he suits the system. As I say, I've thrown up his stats on the screen so many times, I won't do it today, but his ball playing, his passing, his contributions going forward with the ball are second to none. And whilst his defensive stats look a little bit sort of poor, when you sort of dig into the detail, you'll figure out it's more around the way that they play, the way what they ask of him to do, and also his intelligence that leaves him not needing to make as many defensive actions as other defenders do. He's a very clever player and a player that I think would suit the Premier League very, very much. What else have we got to talk about? We've got 6 clubs, guys. 6 clubs are needing to sell before June the 30th, according to Sky Sports. Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle, Everton, Forest and Leicester all need to sell. This, as I said, maybe that's the reason why Newcastle and certainly Villa have voted in favour of trying to help Man City with the legalities and the pursuit of more disruption and distractions from the Premier League's ability to enforce the current rules as we see it. I'd love to see some of these bigger teams have to sell some of their bigger players, because look, they are closing the gap on us. Newcastle and Villa have certainly closed the gap on Tottenham, but they have spent fortunes in order to do so. And if they breach the rules, then they're going to have to pay the consequences. To me, sometimes though, I wonder if the consequences are really that strict. You know, what is 3 points or a 2-point deduction or a 4-point deduction? At the end of the day, if you've gone and spent £100 million more, £50 million more than you're allowed to, like in the case of Forest, in the case of Everton, and with that you bought players that were better than, in their case, the players that were in the squads of the level that they were competing with in the relegation candidate stages, then, you know, at the end of the day, they had better players that probably won them more points than the points that were docked of them anyway. So I'm not entirely sure that the punishment fits the crime necessarily. I think you have strict rules for a reason, and let's see what happens. But we've only got a few days now, maybe, what is it, 3 weeks now until the end of June, and there's been very little movement so far. But Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle, Everton, Forest and Leicester all looking like they're in trouble, all looking like they need to sell very soon some of their best players. Is DEWSBURY-HALL going to go to Chelsea and be the replacement? This is something I'm worried about. Tottenham pursuit of Conor Gallagher, the latest on that one is that he's saying that he's in no rush. He's like everyone else is in a rush to sort it out, but he's not in any rush at all. He doesn't particularly mind waiting. He might even run his contract down next year. He hasn't got any issues, or he doesn't need to sell himself to help FFP purposes, but Chelsea do. But if Chelsea do sell him to us, or Aston Villa for that matter, then Chelsea's intended replacement, from what I've heard in one place, I'm very okay with. If they were to go and buy a Kiernan DEWSBURY-HALL, it's a very, very good player. There's risk and reward there, it makes sense. But within the very same minute of reading that article, I click on another article and see that Chelsea have every intention of trying to sign Julian Alvarez from Manchester City. And that's the sort of story that would really irk me. If we were going to go after a player like Conor Gallagher, who I like as a player, who I see value in and merit in the purchase, but I see a lot of unnecessary helping of Chelsea to pursue their own dreams. And yet, if we were to buy Gallagher from them, that would sort them out, get them over the tricky period of this particular PSR ruling period, and then they could then reset and go and buy someone like Julian Alvarez. And Alvarez would go to Chelsea without even thinking about it because of the brand that Chelsea have for success that was created during a period when they were cheating under Abramovich, and they are still getting all the juice from the squeeze now. Whereas if Tottenham went in for Julian Alvarez, I wouldn't be surprised if Alvarez said, no, I'm not going to go to Tottenham because they haven't won anything. And the reason why we haven't won anything is in no small part because of the team that he currently plays for and the team that he probably will choose to play for, having cheated over the last 25 years. It's an absolute mockery. Anyway, that's the story. Dewsbury-Hall will go to Chelsea. Gallagher might come to Tottenham. I don't know how Villa are supposed to compete with Tottenham for a June 30th deadline now to sign Conor Gallagher if they're part of the team of the list of teams that need to sell before they buy. But that's the story. Anyway, what else we got to go for? Crystal Palace have joined the race for Jobe Bellingham. Sunderland's Jobe Bellingham, we were talking about him yesterday, a really interesting player. You know, will he ever live up to his brother's expectations or his brother's standards? Probably not, it's very difficult. But if he gets 90% of the way there, then you're going to have an absolute superstar. And the guy apparently, as I said to you yesterday, the superlatives around his physical form, his strength, his natural genes is just unmatched by some of his teammates, they say. The next story for you guys is from Genoa. Fabrizio Romano has come out and said that Genoa are very much now advanced in their pursuit and talks with Tottenham regarding Jed Spence, and that they believe that deal will happen very, very soon. It'd be nice to see that one done early, and if we can actually get some money in early as well, it would be an unusual surprise to see so many players leave the club early in the postseason to free up the spots, free up the spaces, get rid of the headaches, get rid of the deadwood. Obviously, we're going to have some heavier deadwood to get rid of, like Tanguy and Ndombele, that will take all summer. But the easier ones seems like we're getting through it, so it's all positive. Next story. Yesterday, I mentioned Pereira from Fulham, and I said I wasn't going to talk too much more about it unless it started to accelerate. Well, do you know what, guys? Today, it has actually accelerated in and around all of the different news outlets. So super agent Jurabchan, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly at all, but he is the agent in charge of Pereira's future. And apparently he's come out and said that Pereira had a 2-year agreement to play in West London with Fulham that has now passed. He loves living in London, doesn't want to leave London. He doesn't mind looking at a new future, a new project, but right now he's in Brazil. He's completely focused on the Copa America, and when that is over and done with, he'll sit down with his agent and make sure that the pre-approved, pre-agreed deals, the gentleman's agreements that they had regarding 2 years in Fulham will be adhered to, held up, and that options will be on the table. And so, you know, if he doesn't want to leave London and all those other things are true, I don't know. Listen, to me, guys, I'm a massive fan of this player. I really do like this player, and I think he's better than Fulham's level. I really do. But there's something about it that just makes me think underwhelming competition for James Maddison. And it's not a position where you want to drop 35 million quid of your precious budget anyway, unless it's a player that you know is going to not just competing with James Maddison, but actually going for the top spot. And so for me, I'm not sure Pereira is that guy. The next guy I'm going to talk about absolutely is, and that is, of course, Eberechi Eze. Not a day goes by, there's not a link to Tottenham. I think my mic has just popped from here to here, so I hope we are still talking, guys. The Athletic have come out and said that there are, in fact, 2 things that need to be known about the Eberechi Eze situation. There is a release clause. It's £60 million with £8 million in some sort of personal fees or performance fees or something that needs to be matched in there. So I'm not entirely sure I'm saying this correctly, but I think about 68 million quid is, give or take, the release clause for Eberechi. Yes, they will have to ask our man Johnny when we speak to him next. And that the second part of that story from The Athletic is that there has been a verbal agreement in place with him and the club that he would play for last season that's just finished would be his last season, and at that stage he would be allowed to leave should an offer come along that was interesting. He also apparently wants to stay in London, and of course when you look and you think about all of the different reasons why Tottenham makes sense to him, he's friends with a lot of our players. After the Crystal Palace home game when we beat them, he was smiling and joking. you know, sunny at the fashion show, all that stuff. I just feel like this is a deal that is written in the stars, and as long as Daniel Levy doesn't screw it up by trying to lowball. I know he doesn't like doing the release clause fee thing, because generally speaking, release clauses mean you have to pay them up front, or there's no requirement to have to pay them in installments like there is the usual shape of most transfers over the cost of the length of the contract. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that one, guys. I think the wind might start popping in a minute, so I've got to be quick. Next one is GEERSTRUIDA, Feyenoord, right back, right-sided centre-back, left-sided centre-back, and also DM. I've spoken about this guy for a couple of years on my channel. Johnny and I talk about him. Johnny's a big fan of him. I don't talk about him so much these days because, you know, like there's so many players you become familiar with, so many players that you follow. But GEERSTRUIDA is a player that we have spoken about for forever. I love him. He plays for Feyenoord. He is linked with Tottenham, but he's also being linked with Liverpool, and that might be a problem. Obviously, Arne Slot going to Liverpool and maybe looking to reposition some of the personnel up there around, and he thinks that GEERSTRUIDA is fit and ready for the Premier League challenge. I'm a big fan of GEERSTRUIDA, but honestly, the valuation metrics on him, they seem a little bit stretched. I think he's got a lot of potential, huge amount of potential. Love his versatility. He's got pace for days, stamina for days, a wonderful passing range on him. Once again, I'll throw the stats up in case you've forgotten. They look unbelievable. They look insane. But you have to always bake in, when you're looking at FB refs with players that are very good, that are playing in the Dutch league, it's almost like a Premier League level player playing in League One, not being disrespectful to the Dutch league, but you're going to stand out and your stats are going to look phenomenal. Whether you continue that level when you move into the Premier League is a different question. The same question you have to ask about players like Santiago Jimenez, same question you have to ask about Mats WEIFFER, and the other Feyenoord DM, the number 6 that I've mentioned before, who in a world where we don't sign Ederson, and talking about Liverpool competing with Tottenham for player signatures, not only are Liverpool going in for GEERSTRUIDA, they are also going for Ederson from Atalanta, who is my first choice pick for the 6 this summer. I think they're ready to put in a £48 million bid. I'm not sure if Tottenham will be able to do that at that price point with the other business we need to do, and so we might have to turn our attentions elsewhere, guys, and one of those areas might be a player like Mats WEIFFER, who also happens to play for Feyenoord, who is a wonderful player, a wonderful youngster, very young, but he looks to me like a mercurial talent. However, again, the stats, I'll throw them on the screen, you'll see all green bars, but it's the Dutch league, and so you just don't know whether or not those green bars become red bars, orange bars, or they stay at green bars when they get challenged at the tougher level, the quicker paced, the more physical Premier League standard. I think that's about it. No, there's 2 more stories for you. I've got to be real quick, because this is turning into an absolute monster for your Friday. Dean Jones of Give Me Sport is saying that Tottenham have prioritised 2 strikers, and both of them we've heard the names of. Neither of them I'm sure will be number 1 choice. One of them is SERHOU GUIRASSY. He's got a low release clause of about 17 million, scores goals for the 2nd season. I used to call him a 1-season wonder, but I had to change my mind on that because this season he did it again. But he is a late bloomer. I still think he's clumsy. I'm still not a massive fan of the player. I think a lot of it looks by luck rather than intention. But Dean Jones says that Tottenham are looking at him because of the valuation, and maybe that's reasonable. And the other player is Santiago Jimenez, who we've spoken about ad nauseum, so I won't bore you with any more details on that one. The last story is that Tottenham apparently are one of 4 or 5 different Premier League clubs that are looking for homegrown talent and looking overseas to find it. And Tammy Abrahams is the player that keeps coming up. I'll be entirely honest, I like Tammy Abrahams as a player. I really do. In patches, he is a player that when he's on, he's incredible, unplayable in my opinion, but then other games you see him and it's always been the same. If like I say, I don't watch a lot of Serie A, but I do read about it. I do watch the highlight reels and stuff, and I sort of get the general catch up of what happened, and the amount of times that I'll see a typically inconsistent performance from Tammy Abrahams yesterday or this weekend. Some games he's on, and when he's on, he's just banging. But we're looking for a player to replace Harry Kane. You need someone where consistency is not an issue. You need someone where you know that that 20 to 25 goals is what you can expect. And I'm not sure that Tammy Abrahams is the right guy for me. It's underwhelming. It really is. But listen, there's a lot gone through there, guys. Loads. I mean, the noise and the news is coming out thick and fast every day. Updates galore. Pereira, do you like him? Do you fancy him coming in? I personally, if we get Pereira, then Eze's obviously not going to happen. GEERSTRUIDA, I really like the player. Tottenham need homegrown players as well, don't forget. And I've got a sneaky feeling that we also need one or two of those home-trained players. So I still think that one of the fullback options might be a disappointing but necessary Kyle Walker-Peters. What about the valuation? How much money do you think, if there is an investment, how much of it do you think will be taken out of the club by Daniel Levy and ENIC as profit on their trade? And how will the fans react to that if that happens? That's actually the real question I want you to answer today. Because, you know, like I say, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I believe that Daniel Levy, whilst making loads of mistakes along the way, 25-year period, now 24 years, you're going to make a lot of mistakes during that time period. But I think he's done a lot of good trying to keep us and maintain some sort of competitive balance within a world where other teams have been allowed to run away with and get away with murder in their spending habits. And our owners aren't ever going to be able to do that or compete with that. But I'd love to know if people really want a new owner, new investment, are they going to be happy to see, you know, the idea that Tottenham sell 30% of the club to some guy somewhere and 25% of that 30% gets taken out of the club and you don't see it anyway? You know, Daniel Levy's diluted in power, but in terms of the actual money staying in the club, I'm not sure how much of it will be there. You'd hope a lot. There's an argument to say a lot of it should stay in, but I'd love to know your thoughts either way. Like, subscribe and comment, guys. Have a wonderful Friday. I'll see you tomorrow. And as always, bye-bye.